Hello and welcome to another Leica review. Today I want to address one of the important questions I keep getting asked, and that is whether we need actually fast lenses. And that is a lot to do with the way you use the camera, the way your photography style is. And that is something that I want to answer today. And it's a question that I have recently been asked. They said, would they be right in purchasing a lens that's ultra fast? And my question is, what is their style of photography? That is something that has not been addressed when people are learning photography, whether they're taking a course or they're attending a workshop. They miss the fine details. Why is it necessary to purchase a lens, let's say a Noctilux 0.95 aperture? It is for a very particular purpose. And imagine using that lens, that is a manual focus lens, in a situation where the subject is moving. It is almost impossible to get that focus right. Similarly, if you are using a 0.95 lens, the 50mm Noctilux, you have to ask yourself, am I going to actually need to open the aperture this much? Because what you're going to do at the end of that spectrum, the aperture, when you have it wide open, it's going to have a softer image than if you had dialed it to f4, f5.6. Now, a lot of photographers, they claim to be a street photographer and they like to use their lenses at f8 or f11. And that is perfectly fine if you are shooting your photographs during daytime. But what happens when nighttime comes in and you are going to use your lens in the most efficient way by dialing it down to maybe f2.8 or f2? Are you going to be able to nail that focus? And that all has to depend on your skill and, more importantly, the focal length that you choose. See, most people don't understand the effects of focal length and how to use those apertures and those focal lengths efficiently, because there is a definite relationship that people miss out. For example, why is it people choose a portrait lens to be 85mm or 90 or 120? That is a particular reason for it, and that is to blur out the background, to separate the subject from the background. So why is it a 90mm instead of a 25mm? And that is something that has not been thought. There has not been question that has been raised. Now, Leica does produce a Simulux 21mm f1.4, but how would you use that lens to use it for example, portrait? It's a creative expression, but nobody really puts emphasis on it. Then you look at Mr. Card, who's the designer of the latest Noctilux, and he says, use that lens for portraiture. And portraiture is something that we want to use, especially if you are doing street photography. You're actually taking portraits of individuals and you're using the background as a storytelling element. And that is something people miss out. And that's why I always say you have to attend a workshop. You have to work with a master. You have to work with someone who knows what he's doing and knows the tricks and the trades and things that you need to do to improve your photography into the next level. Now, what you will realize is you'll start and you rapidly advance to a certain level, and then you'll see your photography level getting stuck, and you spend there 2 years, 3 years. Some people spend eternity there and they never improve their photography because simply they do not see an improvement. They don't see that they could improve on their photography skills, and they don't put the effort in. They just snap away. And that is something that has been an issue, especially for Leica users, because Leica is an instrument. It's a camera that lets you dial in your aperture, dial in your focus, dial in all the settings, and it's a manual camera. So that means you have the full control. And that means you have to know what you're doing Otherwise, you're just using the camera in the most inefficient way. So, getting back to this topic, do you actually need a fast lens? Well, if you're doing street photography, you could use a 28 millimeter 2.8. This lens is so compact, so little, and I really like this lens. It is sharp. In fact, at f4 or f5.6, you look at the sharpness of this lens compared to a Simulux, and you're going to have just about the same kind of quality. Yet, you're paying, 3 times the price for Simulux. And why is that? It's because it's able to gather much more light. And it's a little heavier. Of course, it's going to be heavier because there are more optics in it. And there is more design and more effort that goes into creating a lens that is faster. And I like to use a Simulux. I like to use all my Simuluxes because Simuluxes give me that advantage when I want to separate an individual from the background. And that worked perfectly for my style of photography. But do not think that if you are using your lens at f8 and you own a Simulux that you're getting a better image. You are not getting a better image if you don't know how to use it. And it is for this reason this lens makes sense. This lens has what you have the opportunity to do is the zone focusing. You can do, for example, f8, and it's going to give you a wide range of area that is going to be in focus. And that is beautiful to use with a lens like this, and it is very light. This is the reason why this lens works so perfectly with a Leica M camera. Now, I have done many reviews on Leica M cameras. There are benefits, there are disadvantages. Personally, I love to shoot whether it is an M9 or an M10 or an M240. They all have their own unique character. Personally, if I was using a CCD type of sensor for a black and white photography, I feel that it gives more organic look. It gives more film-like look. But some people might just say, well, it doesn't perform as well under low light situations. Yes, it doesn't. And that's because it has a shortcoming being a CCD type of sensor. Yet, are you going to be able to use your camera, which is whether it's a fast new lens with, for example, M240 or M10, and able to transmit that image that you have imagined in your head to actual photograph and take it to a Lightroom and to be able to manipulate that image to give that character you've been looking for, take that digital effect out of it and make it something that is very film-like. And I don't know if you are a film-like person, but I think film captures the spirit of photography very well. And that's one of the reasons film has not died. It has actually remained as a classic form of photography. And that is something I appreciate. Now, if you haven't had this lens and you wanted to use a fast lens, what should be the considerations? Well, first of all, if you have a fast lens and you are using it wide angle, let's say at 21 millimeter or 24 millimeter, you actually need it less than if you're using it at 50 millimeter. 50 millimeter lens requires more capabilities to gather light. And it is for that reason having a fast lens at 50 millimeter is important, especially if you're doing portraiture. And these lenses wide open, you're most likely going to use it for landscape or architectural photography, where you actually want the image to be in full focus, whether it's in the corners or the center. And that gets back to the question, if your lens that you're using, the wide angle lens, is the type of lens that has a lot of distortion, it's going to throw that beautiful image out of whack. You're going to have the corners out of shape. It's not going to look natural. It's going to look distorted. And that's the reason why you want to have a good lens and have less distortion. It's not as important to have this lens wide open. It is important to have the lens less distortion. And it's for that very reason when you compare this lens at 5.6 to a Simulux at 5.6, it is not that much difference. In fact, you might find some of the images on this sharper. So does it mean that you shouldn't be purchasing Simulux? No, it will depend on how you want to use it. I use a Simulux all the time because I shoot at night. I shoot in low light circumstances. I like to create a beautiful image, and a beautiful image. If you think about it, photography is painting with light. So what are you doing is you are painting it with light, and light means shadow and light. Without the absence of shadow, you cannot have light. And you cannot have light without the absence of shadow. Because otherwise, it will just be white or black. And this is for that reason, it is absolutely essential to be able to use shadows and dark and light to create that image. Especially if you are doing black and white photography, or it's called monochrome photography. So what we are talking about is to use a lens that is fast. Well, does it have to be expensive? The first question. No, it doesn't have to be expensive. They have been producing, camera and lens manufacturers have been producing fast lenses for 30, 40 years. Go back to the 60s, 70s, they had lenses. And I tell you something, the quality of those lenses are still very, very strong. The quality of those lenses are spectacular. And I'll give you more examples on it, but first of all, let's talk about this. It doesn't have to be expensive. This is a Voigtlander f1.1. It's a very fast lens. Metal housing, built like a rock. And it's a very smooth aperture, just as good as probably a Leica. Yet the character is different. It gives you a different look. It has a more bluish tones. It has more of a character that is in itself what a Voigtlander look is. So if that is something that appeals to you, then you should use this. There is nothing wrong with using a Voigtlander lens or a Zeiss lens or a Leica lens. It is that look. I like the Leica look because it has more natural skin tones. It has this beautiful rendition, smooth colors, and it has this 3D pop. So does this. I like to use this at night mostly, more so than the Leicas. I like using the Leicas mostly during daytime or when the lighting conditions are great, because this gives me the bluish tones. In fact, I was doing a film shoot and I was taking some photographs in the meantime. I use this lens because the lights that I use were daylight Kelvins, so I wanted to get that bluish tone, the cinematic look. So this worked better. Could I have done it with a Leica? Yes, surely I could have done it with Leica. I would have taken it to Lightroom and I could have tweaked the colors and the contrast and everything else to make the image look more cinematic. But this is the shortcut. If this is the look that you like, then why not use this? Similarly, speaking of which, you could use a portrait lens like the 75mm f2. Now, think about it. 85mm lenses from Canon, Nikon, everybody else down the line, they have f1.4. Yet Leica hasn't gone that direction yet. It's f2. It's more than sufficient. You're going to blur out the background. You're going to get sharp images. This is apochromatic. So that means you're going to have less purple fringing. That is very, very important, especially if you're doing portraiture. So for me, this is very important. I like the roundish bokeh that comes with it. So does it matter that this is a $5,000 lens versus $1,000 lens? If you know how to use it in the hands of a professional, it could make huge difference. But if you don't know what you're doing, then you haven't invested in your photography and haven't taken your workshop, haven't taken your class, then forget it. You're not going to learn it by just simply going and watching some guy on YouTube trying to tell you how to do photography, unless he's somebody who has mastered the art, who is a filmmaker or is a photographer and has been doing it for 25 years. A lot of the photography channels, you look at them, the guys are not photographers. They just picked up a camera and they call themselves photographers. But look at their track. Look at their history. Have they been doing it? And what they have to show as part of their work. I will not mention the name. One of the biggest channels is the guy says, I'm not a photographer. I'm just a reviewer. But you see him doing the Leica review. In fact, he was the one who was invited by Leica to do the review on the new M10. Why? Because he's got views. So do not mix the quality of the review with the reviewer. Look at the bottom line. What is that person delivering? Is he giving you the tips? And I like to give tips. I like to share my ideas. I like to share my opinions with people that come to me because that's how I learned. This is the way I like to teach. I have a friend of mine. He's now in India. He went there for a couple of days and probably a week, 2 weeks to photograph. And he's going to come back with his photographs and we're going to discuss it. Am I charging him money? No. Why? Because a friend, if I can give him something nice and he appreciates it, that is how it grows. That's how it becomes important. And so what if you decide that you are going to buy a lens and try it out? And you come to me and say, Oz, I'd like to try out a Noctilux. See if I like it. Go, by all means, do it. Try out the Noctilux. Try out the Similux. See what you like about it. And experiment with the lenses. So, getting back to a fast lens. A fast lens is just a tool. It's like a doctor operating. He has 50 different scalpels. He only uses maybe 6, maybe even 2. But what you have to understand is, how are you using this lens in your photography? And if you have lenses sitting in your bag that you haven't used, that means you are not doing your photography justice. Because if you're not familiar with using a 75mm, but you have it sitting in your bag, it's not doing you good. If you are saying to yourself, I'm a street photographer, but you haven't experimented with going out a 50mm and trying to photograph to improve your photography, then you haven't taken the next step in your photography. When was the last time you push yourself and your limits? And this is what I'm talking about when I say to my students in my workshops, come, try out, learn something. If you take only 2 things home and that improves your photography, that's a long way. That is a long way. And spend your time learning how this art works. Look at the old masters. Look at all the old photographs and how are they changed to this date. See how this image is rendered with a Leica versus a Zeiss. I mean, I use Zeisses. I use Ultra Primes in my filming, $25,000 pieces. But I don't consider that to be a better lens than, for example, Leica Similux C. There's a Cooke lens. It's $40,000. Similarly, $40,000 for a Similux C. The price doesn't matter. There's always a more expensive lens. And people associate price often with the idea that you have to have an expensive lens to get good images. You're the one who shoots. You're the one who presses that shutter. If you got it out of focus, no matter how good your lens is, you're not going to get a good image. So learn about the speed of the lens and use that lens at different speeds. Use it at f2, use it at f1.4 or f5.6. Never shoot your lens always at the same aperture. It doesn't improve your photography. So it is for that reason I ask you to take a challenge today and write to me. Send me an email, send me a message, write on the YouTube or subscribe to our channel. I will tell you my opinion. And I have started a form. It's called Leica Form. I will put the information down below. Just go there, subscribe, and share your photographs. And I will tell you my opinion if you want my opinion. Or if you have a question about something, I'll give you an answer. And I hope you have enjoyed this review. And I hope that you have taken something important from this video. and I look forward to seeing you in our next review. I thank you for watching.